In the world of the bold and the beautiful, obsession rarely announces itself with violence at first. It arrives quietly, disguised as longing, loneliness, and the human need to feel anchored to something meaningful after being unmoored. This is how RJ's story begins. Not as a villain's manifesto, but as the inward collapse of a young man who returns home only to discover that home no longer recognizes him, and worse, that he no longer recognizes himself. His descent is not sudden. It is gradual, layered, and terrifying precisely because every step feels, to him, emotionally justified. RJ's return is marked by displacement rather than celebration. Forrester Creations hums with the same polished energy it always has. But the rhythm no longer matches his own. The familiar corridors feel narrower. The conversations sharper. The laughter somehow excluding him even when it is not intended to. He walks through rooms filled with people who have continued living, evolving, forming alliances and attachments in his absence. While he stands still, a silent observer searching for relevance. That sense of invisibility gnaws at him, creating a hollow space inside that demands to be filled. It is within this emotional vacuum that Elektra Forrester first appears. Not merely as a woman, but as a focal point around which RJ's fractured sense of self can reorganize. Their first encounter is unremarkable on the surface, yet seismic beneath it. Elektra does not try to impress him. She does not linger or perform. She simply exists with a quiet confidence, moving through the creative chaos of Forrester Creations as though she belongs there unequivocally. That ease captivates RJ more than beauty ever could. In Elektra, he sees what he lacks: certainty, purpose, and an effortless connection to the world around her. His attraction is immediate, but it is not purely romantic. It is aspirational, almost reverent, as though being close to her might somehow restore the parts of himself that feel lost. What begins as curiosity soon sharpens into attention. RJ starts noticing patterns. When Elektra arrives at the office, who she speaks to first, how her expression changes depending on the room she's in. He tells himself this attentiveness is harmless, even natural, but the truth is more unsettling. He is not simply observing, he is cataloging. Each detail becomes a thread in a private narrative he constructs about her. One in which he assigns meaning and intention to every glance and gesture. This internal story grows richer, more elaborate, until it begins to feel more real to him than their actual limited interactions. At Forrester Creations, RJ positions himself strategically. Never overtly intrusive but always nearby. He listens more than he speaks, absorbing Elektra's words as though they are meant specifically for him, even when they are not. At Will Spencer's beach house, where Elektra occasionally appears, RJ's fixation deepens. The ocean, expansive and isolating, mirrors his internal state, amplifying his sense that Elektra is a rare point of clarity in an otherwise overwhelming world. He begins to associate her presence with calm, her absence with agitation. The line between admiration and possession blurs quietly. RJ starts collecting small items. Not trophies in the traditional sense, but fragments of Elektra's presence. A forgotten handkerchief, a discarded sketch she deemed unworthy, becomes sacred in his hands. These objects are not valuable because of their material worth, but because they allow him to feel connected to her even when she is not physically present. He convinces himself that this is devotion, that cherishing these remnants proves the depth of his feelings. In reality, they serve as anchors to a fantasy in which Elektra already belongs to him. As RJ's fixation intensifies, it does not go unnoticed. Will, already carrying a complicated emotional history with both Dylan and Elektra, senses the shift almost instinctively. Will has learned, through experience, to recognize when affection turns competitive, when interest becomes something sharper and more dangerous. RJ's lingering looks, his sudden availability, his subtle attempts to insert himself into Elektra's orbit, all of it registers as a threat. For Will, this is not merely about romance. It is about territory, about the fragile balance he has struggled to maintain in relationships that are perpetually under scrutiny. The confrontation that follows is inevitable. Will's warning to RJ to stay away from Elektra is delivered with the authority of someone who believes he is protecting what matters. Yet the effect is the opposite of what he intends. Rather than discouraging RJ, it crystallizes his obsession, reframing it as a battle he must fight. In Will's dismissal, RJ hears confirmation of his deepest insecurity, that he is once again being pushed aside, rendered insignificant. The warning becomes a challenge, transforming Elektra from an object of longing into a prize to be won. A symbol of validation he cannot afford to lose. The parallel to Thomas Forrester's past fixation on Hope Logan is impossible to ignore. RJ is aware of that history, of how obsession disguised itself as love and led to manipulation. isolation, and trauma. Yet instead of serving as a cautionary tale, it becomes a distorted blueprint. RJ tells himself that Thomas failed because he hesitated, because he allowed interference, because he did not go far enough. In RJ's mind, the lesson is not to avoid obsession, but to execute it more completely, more decisively. This cognitive shift marks the true turning point. RJ begins to believe that Elektra's autonomy is an obstacle rather than a right. That the world around her is a source of contamination pulling her away from what they could have together. He reframes isolation as protection, control as care. The more he convinces himself that others will, Forrester Creations, the expectations attached to Elektra's name, are corrupting influences, the more righteous his intentions feel. He is no longer pursuing Elektra, he is, in his own mind, rescuing her. The plan forms not as a sudden impulse, but as the logical conclusion of RJ's internal reasoning. If proximity breeds competition and interference, then separation must create clarity. He imagines a remote location, far from the noise of Los Angeles, where Elektra can finally see him without distraction. In this fantasy, her initial fear is temporary, a misunderstanding that will dissolve once she realizes the purity of his intentions. He envisions conversations where she thanks him for removing her from the pressures of her world, where love blooms naturally in the absence of external voices. What makes this vision so dangerous is its emotional coherence within RJ's fractured psyche. Every step aligns with his need for control, his fear of abandonment, his desire to matter unequivocally to someone. He is not driven by hatred or cruelty, but by a warped form of devotion that refuses to acknowledge Elektra's agency. In his mind, the kidnapping is not an act of violence but of commitment, the ultimate proof that he is willing to do anything for love. As RJ prepares to act, the world around him continues as if unaware of the storm gathering beneath the surface. Forrester Creations buzzes with deadlines and designs. Will remains vigilant, sensing danger but unable to articulate it fully. Elektra herself moves forward, unaware that her every gesture has been reinterpreted through the lens of someone else's obsession. This contrast between normalcy and impending catastrophe heightens the tension, emphasizing how easily darkness can hide behind familiar faces and inherited names. RJ's isolation becomes total in these final moments. The objects he has collected, once comforting, now feel like confirmations of destiny. The warnings he has received are reframed as antagonism. The past mistakes of others are no longer warnings but stepping stones. In choosing to sever Elektra from the world, RJ believes he is finally choosing himself, asserting a significance he has long felt denied. Yet this assertion comes at the cost of empathy, consent, and reality itself. This storyline does not ask the audience to excuse RJ's actions, but it does demand that they understand them. It explores how obsession can grow from emotional neglect, how entitlement can masquerade as love, and how easily trauma can be inherited not through blood alone, but through example. By drawing deliberate parallels to Thomas and Hope's past, the narrative underscores a haunting truth. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, history does not simply repeat, it evolves, becoming more insidious each time it resurfaces. As RJ stands on the edge of his plan, convinced that isolation is the only path to connection, the story leaves us with a chilling question. Is this the moment where someone intervenes and breaks the cycle? Or is it the point of no return where obsession fully eclipses humanity? In a universe defined by passion, legacy, and unresolved wounds, the answer is never simple, and the consequences are never contained. The Wednesday, January 21st episode of The Bold and the Beautiful unfolds like a slow-burning storm. One that does not arrive with thunder at first but with a suffocating pressure that makes every breath feel heavier than the last. At its core, this chapter of the story is not simply about romance, temptation, or risky invitations. It is about the terrifying intimacy of emotional proximity, the kind that exposes old wounds, awakens buried desires, and threatens to collapse the fragile structures people build to survive their pasts. The narrative threads move deliberately between Taylor's office, the Spencer Beach house, and the Forrester workplace, but emotionally, all roads lead to the same crossroads. The moment when restraint fails, fear tightens its grip, and love becomes indistinguishable from danger. At the center of the storm stands Taylor Hayes, a woman who has built her life around understanding the human psyche while struggling to master her own. Her office, usually a sanctuary of calm, becomes the first battlefield of the episode, not because of any overt confrontation with a patient, but because of a confrontation with her daughter. When Steffi Forrester Finnegan realizes that Deacon remains under Taylor's professional care, the emotional temperature of the room rises instantly. This is not simply a disagreement over ethics or boundaries. It is the collision of a daughter's primal fear with a mother's complicated compassion. Steffi does not see a patient in Deacon. She sees a chain that leads straight back to Sheila, a woman whose shadow still looms large over every corner of her life. In Steffi's mind, allowing Deacon to remain close to Taylor is not a neutral decision. It is an open invitation to catastrophe. Steffi's anger erupts not because she wants to control her mother, but because she cannot bear the thought of losing her. The fear that grips her is raw and unfiltered, born from years of trauma that have taught her how quickly love can turn lethal. The idea that Sheila could use Deacon as a doorway back into Taylor's life ignites a panic that Steffi can barely contain. Her words may sound harsh, her demands absolute, but beneath them lies a childlike desperation, the need to keep her mother alive in a world that has already proven how merciless it can be. As tears spill over, Steffi's fury gives way to vulnerability, revealing a woman who has survived too much and now refuses to gamble with the life of the person she loves most. Taylor, faced with her daughter's anguish, is forced into an impossible position. On one side stands her professional integrity and her belief in rehabilitation. The conviction that people like Deacon can change when someone finally sees them as more than their worst mistakes. On the other side stands Steffi's terror, a living testament to the long-term consequences of underestimating Sheila Sharp. Taylor understands that fear intimately, she has felt it herself. Yet she also recognizes something dangerous stirring within her. Something that has nothing to do with clinical judgment and everything to do with the way Deacon looks at her, the way his voice softens when he speaks about his failures, the way his progress feels personal rather than procedural. This internal conflict gnaws at her, eroding the professional distance she has fought to maintain. As the episode progresses, Steffi's emotional collapse deepens. The thought of Sheila harming Taylor, or even indirectly pushing her toward an early death through stress and danger, becomes an obsession she cannot shake. Every memory of past violence, every moment of terror Sheila inflicted on her family, replays itself with merciless clarity. Steffi's fear is not abstract, it is visceral, rooted in experience. The writers allow this fear to breathe, to expand across multiple scenes, turning Steffi's anxiety into a looming presence that follows her even when she leaves Taylor's office. It becomes clear that for Steffi, the line between vigilance and paranoia has blurred. And that blur is precisely what makes her so compelling and so tragic. Meanwhile, Deacon Sharp approaches his next session with Taylor carrying a weight of his own. For Deacon, these appointments have become more than a step on a path toward redemption. They have become a lifeline. Taylor represents the first person who has truly listened without judgment, who has challenged him without condemning him, who has seen potential where others only saw liability. When Taylor hesitates, when she begins to question whether continuing as his therapist is wise, Deacon hears not professional caution but the threat of abandonment. His resistance to the idea is immediate, emotional, and deeply human. Losing Taylor's guidance feels, to him, like being pushed back toward the edge he has worked so hard to escape. Taylor's attempt to reassert boundaries is rational, responsible, and necessary, at least on paper. She understands that the emotional connection forming between them is dangerous, that it compromises the integrity of the therapeutic relationship and exposes both of them to consequences they may not be able to control. Yet when she voices these concerns, the words feel hollow even to her own ears. Deacon's progress, his vulnerability, and the unspoken bond that has grown between them make it painfully clear that this is no longer a simple matter of ethics. It is a matter of desire, empathy, and the intoxicating pull of being seen and needed. The moment of intimacy that follows is not sudden. It is the inevitable result of prolonged emotional proximity. When Taylor and Deacon find themselves standing too close, when silence stretches just long enough to become charged, the tension becomes unbearable. They are acutely aware of the risks, the professional fallout, the family backlash, the moral implications. Yet awareness does not equate to control. The kiss that may follow is not merely passionate, it is symbolic. It represents the surrender to a truth both have been denying, that their connection has crossed a line, and that once crossed, there may be no easy way back. They are, unmistakably, playing with fire, fully aware that the flames could consume them both. While Taylor and Deacon navigate their dangerous attraction, another storyline unfolds with a quieter but no less significant intensity at the Spencer Beach house. Will Spencer, motivated by kindness and perhaps a desire for connection, extends a seemingly harmless invitation to Dylan. With Electra unexpectedly working late, Will's plan to share dinner takes on an improvisational quality that feels casual on the surface, but carries deeper implications beneath. Cooking teriyaki chicken becomes an act of hospitality, a gesture that signals openness and trust. When Dylan accepts, The evening transforms into an opportunity for two people to bridge the gap between gratitude and obligation. As Will and Dylan share a meal, their conversation drifts toward themes of repayment and loyalty. Dylan's desire to repay Will's kindness is sincere, born from a place of humility and appreciation. Yet it also hints at a vulnerability that could be exploited. Gratitude, when mixed with desperation, can lead people into dangerous territory, and the episode subtly plants the seeds of potential peril. The beach house, often a symbol of freedom and escape, begins to feel like a space where lines might blur and intentions might be misunderstood. The danger here is not overt but psychological, rooted in the imbalance of power that can arise when one person feels indebted to another. Back at Forrester Creations, the absence of Elektra from Will's dinner plans creates an opening for RJ Forrester. With Elektra unable to leave work, RJ steps into the gap with an offer of shared takeout during her break. This simple act carries emotional weight, signaling his desire to strengthen their bond through presence and reliability, unlike the charged intensity of Taylor and Deacon's interactions or the quiet risk of Will and Dylan's dinner. RJ's gesture is grounded in steadiness. Yet even this seemingly safe connection exists within a web of shifting loyalties and romantic possibilities that define life in Los Angeles' most glamorous circles. Elektra, caught between professional demands and personal connections, responds to RJ's attention with a mix of appreciation and uncertainty. The shared meal becomes a moment of reprieve from workplace pressure, but it also underscores the choices she must make about where her emotional investments lie. As RJ and Elektra grow closer, the contrast with Dylan's solitude at the beach house becomes more pronounced. Each character is, in their own way, navigating intimacy, some rushing toward it, others cautiously building it, and still others grappling with the consequences of accepting it too freely. Hovering over all these storylines is the specter of Sheila Sharp, whose influence is felt even in her absence. Sheila's history of violence and manipulation casts a long shadow, shaping decisions and fueling fears. For Steffi, Sheila is the embodiment of chaos, the reminder that no amount of love or caution can fully protect those she targets. For Taylor, Sheila represents the ultimate boundary she must not cross, the line that makes her question whether her compassion for Deacon is worth the potential cost. The mere possibility of Sheila re-entering their lives turns every risk into a potential disaster. As the episode draws toward its conclusion, the romantic undercurrents intensify, setting the stage for future fallout. Taylor and Deacon's inability to deny their feelings marks a turning point that will reverberate through their families and professional lives. Will's invitation to Dylan, while rooted in generosity, opens the door to unforeseen complications that could test his judgment and safety. RJ's growing closeness with Elektra hints at stability, yet even stability can be fragile in a world where secrets and desires constantly collide. Ultimately, this chapter of The Bold and the Beautiful is less about the events themselves and more about the emotional truths they reveal. It explores how fear can masquerade as control, how compassion can slip into temptation, and how kindness can become a liability when paired with vulnerability. The episode invites viewers to sit with discomfort, to recognize that love is rarely safe and that the choices made in moments of emotional intensity often carry consequences far beyond what anyone anticipates. As romance blossoms and danger simmers just beneath the surface, one thing becomes clear: in this world, every connection is a risk, and every risk has the power to change everything.
Oh,